We have talked on several occasions about black budgets and secret space missions, and with good reason. One particular of these alleged missions, however, stands out among the many. Project Serpo, according to the claims, would see a dozen human beings take part in an intergalactic exchange program, one where they would find themselves in another galaxy in the name of research and relations. What's more, this project dates to the beginnings of the modern age of UFO incidents and the infamous Roswell crash. In 2005, an anonymous source sent a series of emails to a UFO discussion group led by former U.S. government employee Victor Martinez. These emails detailed the existence of an exchange program between the United States government and the Ebens, alien beings from a planet called Serpo. The source identified himself as a retired employee of the government, claiming he had participated in a special program. According to the anonymous source, in the early 1950s, the government initiated Project Serpo, a top-secret program intended to open communication channels between mankind and a race of extraterrestrials from the planet located in the Zeta Reticuli star system. Zeta Reticuli is a binary star system in the southern constellation of Reticulum. Although both stars are similar in size to our own Sun, spectral analysis shows they are much younger, at around 2 billion years of age. Furthermore, the aliens inhabiting Serpo originated elsewhere in the galaxy. The incident that led to this interplanetary connection was none other than the Roswell crash. Or, should I say crashes, because there were two of them. One southwest of Corona, New Mexico, and the other near Pelona Peak, which is a rock's throw away from Datil, New Mexico. The anonymous source wrote the following. The crash involved two extraterrestrial aircrafts. The Corona site was found a day later by an archaeology team. This team reported the crash site to the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department. A deputy arrived the next day and summoned a police officer. One live EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, was found hiding behind a rock. The entity was given water, but declined food. The entity was later transferred to Los Alamos. It's interesting to note that the entity accepted water. This seems to suggest it might have shared a biology similar to our own, and also cements the idea that life on Earth might have originated elsewhere in the universe. Eventually, the Roswell Army Airfield was notified of the crash and promptly intervened. After a thorough examination of the Corona site, all evidence was loaded onto flatbed trucks and carried away to an undisclosed location. A total of 6 extraterrestrial bodies were recovered and transported to the Los Alamos National Laboratory because the facility had a recently developed cooling system that allowed scientists to preserve the bodies for subsequent research. The alien was kept under strict surveillance at the same facility. Another 2 years would pass until the second crash site would be discovered. The desiccated bodies were whisked off to Sandia Army Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In the meantime, the extraterrestrial being had already established a means of communication with the scientists, and we can assume they were very eager to know what he had to say. The alien revealed the name of his home world. He also informed scientists about the various instruments and ultra-advanced technology on board the 2 downed spacecraft. You can envision the power and demonstration-hungry military officials pressuring the translators to squeeze more out of their extraterrestrial captive. Until his death in 1952, the alien being continued to provide information regarding the items inside the 2 spaceships. We could probably blame him for all the triangle-shaped UFOs zipping silently above our heads. At least part of those must be man-made and operated, albeit using technology reverse-engineered from these early UFO crashes. Before he died, the alien being managed to set up one of the communication devices present aboard one of their vehicles and contact his homeworld. The humans who oversaw this procedure must have been sitting on the outer edge of their seats until the response came back. But back it came, and things eventually turned out way better than they could have hoped for. The Ebens agreed to come visit. The Ebens touched ground somewhere near Alamogordo, New Mexico. They unceremoniously retrieved the bodies of their kin and engaged in information exchange with the Earthlings via a translation device. For the betterment of mankind, the Ebens agreed to set up an exchange program. 12 members were carefully selected for the mission. 8 U.S. Air Force, 2 U.S. Army, and 2 U.S. Navy. 2 of them were doctors, 3 were scientists, 2 were linguists, 2 of them handled security, 2 were pilots, and the last one was the leader, an Air Force colonel. All of them were given alternate identities, and they were effectively erased from all military and civilian records. It was as if they never existed in the first place, and that made them ideal candidates for a mission from which they might never return. The 12 went through 6 months of rigorous training and were given the order to maintain contact with Earth by the already established communication links. As per their agreement, the aliens returned in 1965 and left one of their own behind shortly before leaving with the brave 12-man. Their mission was supposed to last 10 years, during which regular communication had to be maintained. The team's transmissions to Earth's headquarters were sporadic at best and didn't always include the greatest of news. 3 years into their stay, 1 doctor and 1 of the security personnel died of radiation exposure. Pneumonia and injuries sustained from a fall were the culprits. 5 years after they'd left, communication stopped altogether. The U.S. government was in the dark regarding Project Serpo, of which they had had such high expectations. 2 of the Americans enjoyed life on Serpo so much that they decided to stay there. The remaining astronauts returned home in 1978, and the government quarantined them for an entire year. During that time, they had many debriefings. As a matter of fact, the complete account they brought back is said to have numbered around 3,000 pages. According to the crew members, the cosmic journey to Eben lasted only 9 months, despite the distance of 39 light-years. With a diameter of 7,200 miles, the planet was slightly smaller than Earth. It had 2 moons, the day was 43 Earth hours long, and it revolved around its star in 865 Earth days. The Eben solar system numbered 6 planets. The Ebens had established bases on the one that was nearest to Serpo, nicknamed Otto, but it was a lifeless world. Silas, another of the planets in their solar system, had its own native life forms, but none were intelligent. The Ebens mined it for minerals, which their homeworld lacked. On Serpo, the heat was extreme by human standards, and it took the crew a long time to adjust. Water was readily available, but food was a problem, so they eventually had to resort to eating native cuisine. At first, it caused them gastrointestinal problems, but they eventually adapted. All crew members were allowed to roam freely, and they traveled wherever they pleased. Halfway through their stay, they decided to relocate to the northern part of the planet, where temperatures were cooler and allowed for the growth of ample vegetation. The interplanetary human crew had experienced difficulties adapting to the hot and dry climate on Serpo, determined by the increased levels of solar radiation. The anonymous source wrote the following. The visitors built a small community for the team. The only major problem was time. Time was different on the visitors' planet. I don't think anyone ever figured it out. The visitors had no clocks. They didn't judge or account for time as we did. They found our attempts to account for time strange. Despite dismissing watches, the Ebens were extremely disciplined in their daily lives. Every one of them worked on a schedule based on the movement of their central sun. Speaking of suns, it never got completely dark on Serpo on account of the second star dimly illuminating the sky. The Ebens were the only population present on Serpo, and they numbered around 650,000, inhabiting many areas of the planet in relatively small communities. There was nothing like the metropolises we have here on Earth. Industry was present, although not on a large scale. All of their food was artificially grown in large structures in the north. Although there were numerous animal species on Serpo, no meat was eaten, and the Ebens found the idea appalling. Transportation was done with the help of floating vehicles that relied on a power source that is unknown to humans. Pollution was virtually non-existent, and so was crime. While the Ebens had an army of a sort, no guns or any other weapons were ever seen by the human crew. Each small community held meetings to discuss and resolve their internal issues, but there was a central governing body that handled all the top-level decision-making. Money was an unknown concept. So was capitalism, or any other economic system, based on differential levels of ownership. No commercial activity occurred, and instead of shops, stores, and malls, there were distribution centers. Each and every one of the Ebens were issued what they needed, and everyone seemed pleased with the situation. They also reportedly enjoyed playing team games, and music was not unknown to them. The Ebens did not evolve on Serpo. They had colonized the planet some 5,000 Earth years prior to the events described here, after their initial home became threatened by intense volcanic activity. Having mastered spaceflight long before those cataclysmic events made them relocate. Finding Serpo wasn't impossible. They were no strangers to conflict and warfare either. The collective memory of the Ebens was marred with memories of a great war fought against a hostile species from another planet. They had succeeded in eliminating the threat, but at a great cost. The human crew speculated this was the reason why the total population numbered just 650,000, and what determined their aversion towards weapons. As a spacefaring civilization, the Ebens were well aware of the existence of other intelligent species in the far corners of our galaxy. Some were peaceful, and some kept to themselves, but the ones that are hostile made the subject of a stern warning. Despite the fact that the official report is said to stretch along 3,000 pages, much of the knowledge imparted by the settlers of Serpo was lost in translation, and due to the human crew's inability to comprehend certain concepts. Although scientists and linguists were chosen for the mission, they found it impossible to figure out parts of the Eben culture and most of their technology. And they weren't allowed to bring anything back, despite it being the express will of their superiors. Nothing is known about the defectors. For all we know, they could be alive and well, sipping on longevity elixirs and not regretting anything. Attempts to contact the Ebens continued until 1988, but the only reply received was silence. The men who returned had been exposed to high levels of radiation for extended periods of time, and they suffered radiation-related illnesses as a result. The last surviving member of the Serpo exchange program died in a VA hospital in 2002. It appears there's no direct way of determining the truth. Wikipedia says there are no planets orbiting around the two Zeta Reticuli stars, and that would seem to dismantle the entire theory. But it would be very unwise to think that Wikipedia is indeed neutral in its allegiance and completely out of the reach of the powers that be. It would also be reckless to ignore that there are some inconsistencies in what we know about Project Serpo, and some of the information allegedly brought back by the human crew legitimately raises suspicion. A third alternative is also possible. Project Serpo could be the modified echo of an interplanetary exchange program that indeed took place, its exact details lost or willfully suppressed. One thing is certain though, strange and covert operations do take place and will continue to do so, no matter what we believe or how big of a fuss we make about it. What do you think about the Project Serpo story? Do you believe it actually happened, and do you think some similar interplanetary exchange programs were made by our governments? Thank you for watching. Please give us a like, and don't forget to subscribe.